The Graduate School of Education and Psychology is delighted to have you here this evening. We are beginning the fall term of our Margaret J. Weber Distinguished Lecture Series. My name is Yas Hardaway, and I'm the Executive Director of GSEP Career Services and an adjunct faculty in the Psychology Division. It is my honor to serve as your moderator this evening. I'm so delighted to see all of you here and also want to welcome to those who are joining us via Zoom. The Margaret J. Weber Distinguished Lecture Series was established in 2014 through an endowment by alumni and friends to honor Dean Emeritus Dr. Margaret J. Weber. GSEP's purpose in providing this series is to support its mission to promote academic excellence, social purpose, meaningful service, and personal fulfillment. Our theme for 2022-2023 is Beyond Inclusion, Removing Barriers to Create Belonging. At GSEP, we believe there is an urgency in creating belonging, and the responsibility for removing inclusion barriers that lies with those in position to do so. GSEP is committed to engaging in continual learning and personal reflection to effect change and pave pathways towards a more equitable future. GSEP embraces human diversity, which we believe to be the natural expression of God's creation. We foster and advocate for multicultural proficiency. And while GSEP works to actively promote discourse that values each member's background, experiences, and perspective, the views and opinions expressed by our panel tonight belong solely to the individuals and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of GSEP. So tonight we shine a light on the current situation in Iran. As an Iranian immigrant myself, this topic is very close to my heart. On February 5th, 1979, my parents and I boarded the plane in Tehran and headed to the United States. This was at the very start of the revolution. Our plan was to visit my paternal grandparents here in California, to stay about a month until things settled down, and then we were to return to Iran. However, we never went back to live there. My dad got a job in South Texas, and we began building our life as a family here in the US. Since then, I've had the opportunity to go back to Iran at several different points in my life. And each time I left with new experiences, new observations, and new questions. At the time, I was too young to be able to cognitively process what that immigration experience must have been like for my parents. But looking back now, I am in awe of their courage and their resilience. So I share this with all of you so that I can communicate how personal this topic is to me. This topic is personal to each of our panelists here this evening as they share how profoundly this experience has impacted them. And I know that they're not alone. I know that there are others here in the room and on Zoom who can also relate. So I just ask us that we co-create a community of care here this evening. And I invite you, if you feel called, to take your hand and place it over your heart at any point throughout the presentation where you feel particularly touched or moved, or where you resonate with something that was shared by our panelists. In doing so, you are communicating your support and solidarity. I'd also like to recognize our interim dean of the Graduate School of Education of Psychology, Dr. Farzeen Majidi. Dr. Majidi, I invite you to share a greeting.
Thank you. Good evening and welcome. We are delighted to have you here with us tonight. I welcome you, those of you who are with us in the room and those of you who are our Zoomies and are with us virtually. I want to also thank you, the Margaret J. Weber Distinguished Lecture Series, for sponsoring this event. We are truly honored that you would do this. The title of tonight is Iran, Women, Life, Freedom. Before we begin, I want to thank Vanessa John and her team, Massa and Charles, for the incredible work they did organizing tonight. Dr. Jennifer Miyake-Trapp, Lucy, Linda, Elias, who are working the cameras to provide this live event on Zoom, and also all the other folks who behind the scene have worked tirelessly to make this possible. Truly grateful and thank you. I also come from Iran, land of Cyrus the Great. Cyrus the Great was the first king of kings in history. His empire pretty much took over the whole world. He ruled over much of the world as we know it today through his kingdom. He died in December 4th of 531 BC. Empires, land grabs, imperialism, and colonialism that seem mighty glorious at the time, as time fades, so do they, and they fall in the annals of history unremarkably. Yet, simple concepts such as love, equality, equal rule of law for all, freedom, liberty, have stood the test of time throughout the entire history of humanity. And it's ironic, Cyrus the Great is better known for Declaration of Human Rights, the first one of its kind over 2,500 years ago, than he is for any one of his glorious conquests that marks the history. Today, however, ironically, his country burns in an uprising, requesting the very principles he declared 2,500 years ago. In this glorious uprising, as we see, we are led by the women of Iran, asking for equality. A mere look at our history will tell you that, for example, the Persian language doesn't have gender pronouns. The language itself that dates back 3,000 years does not distinguish between men and women. All use the same pronoun, gender neutral, it. And while many countries seek for the first leader of their country to be female, Iran has a history of 2 Persian kings that were women. They still held the title of kings because it's a gender neutral position. Now we see this brave uprising for asking for women, rights, and liberty. Hafiz, the 13th century poem, shared a poem with us that has been translated to English by Dick Davis, and I have modified it slightly. I'd like to read that to you. God's children are parts of one reality, since all have sprung from one identity. If one part of the body is hurt, the rest cannot remain unmoved or undistressed. If you are not touched by others in pain, the name of God's child is not something you can really claim. At Pepperdine University, we are governed and ruled and guided, most importantly, by God's own words. In our commitment to equality and belonging, we follow 2 principles. I'd like to read them to you. The first one is elevating all voices. We have committed to creating opportunities, forums, platforms for all people and narratives to be heard and seen. And the second one is celebrating all diversity. We respect and honor all history and tradition of all of our sisters and brothers. We celebrate their joy and mourn with them in their suffering and expressions of injustice. Today, this session is governed by 2 of these. We want to elevate voices and share the suffering of our sisters and brothers in Iran. Today is not a political rally, nor is it a recommendation for policy change or support of any political group. Rather, today is about giving voices to those in Iran who seek life and liberty. Their voices is either unheard, muffled, or drowned in the bottomless pit of personal and collective greed and interest. We mourn with our sisters and brothers in Iran for their losses and for their suffering. We see you. We hear you. We elevate your voices so others can hear and see your infinite courage and bravery. You inspire us. You move us. May God, with all his glory, extend his shield around you to protect you and save you from harm and hardship. Zan, Zendegi, Azadi.
Thank you, Dr. Majidi. I'd now like to invite our Director of GSEP Alumni Relations, Dr. Renee Dorn, to lead us in prayer as we move into tonight's program. Dr. Dorn.
Thank you so much, Yaz. And from the GSEP Office of Alumni Relations, I once again welcome all of you here this evening, and thank you to all alumni who are joining us this evening. May the God of hope fill you with all joy and peace in believing, so that you may abound in hope by the power of the Spirit. That's Romans 15:13. At this time, would you all join me in prayer? Dear Lord, as we move ahead in our lives and experience the struggles that tend to weigh us down physically, emotionally, and spiritually, let us focus on you and your strength to help us get through the trials and tribulations that come our way. Lord, continue to show us that light of hope so that we may see joy in the faces of others, hear others speak of your power, and feel your presence and know you are with us. I pray that as we listen to our speakers this evening, that we will learn from them, find ways where we can offer strength to one another, and grow in the knowledge that together we can do all things through Christ who strengthens us. And all these things I ask in Jesus' name, amen. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Dorn. Tonight, through a conversation with our panelists, we look at the impetus for these current calls for change in Iran, how members of our GSEP community and the Iranian community at large are processing and responding to the crisis. And we'll look at ways we can all educate ourselves more on the situation and how meaningful that truly is for those who are on the front lines in Iran. To begin, we will listen to a song called Baraye, which means for the sake of or because of. It was written by Shervin Hajipour. The song amassed 40 million views online before authorities forced him to take it down. He was arrested and released 2 days later on bail.
برای توی کوچه رقصیدن، برای ترسیدن به وقت بوسیدن، برای خواهرم، خواهرت، خواهرامون، برای تغییر مغزها که پوسیدن، برای شرمندگی، برای بیپولی، برای حسرت یک زندگی معمولی، برای کودک زباله‌گرد و آرزوهاش، برای این اقتصاد دستوری، برای این هوای آلوده، برای ولیعصر و درختای فرسوده، برای پیروز و احتمال انقراضش، برای سگهای بیگناه ممنوعه، برای گریه های بیوقفه، برای تصویر تکرار این لحظه، برای چهره ای که میخنده، برای دانش آموزا، برای آینده، برای این بهشت اجباری، برای نخبه های زندانی، برای کودکان افغانی، برای این همه برای غیر تکراری، برای این همه شعارهای تو خالی، برای آوار خونه های پوشالی، برای احساس آرامش، برای خورشید پس از شبای طولانی، برای قرصای اعصاب و بیخوابی، برای مرد میهن آبادی، برای دختری که آرزو داشت پسر بود، برای زن زندگی آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی، برای آزادی.
Baraya has become the unofficial anthem of Iran's protests, which is why we have broadcasted here this message tonight. I am now so honored to introduce this panel. Each member, while highly educated and accomplished, will be speaking from their personal experiences and perspectives. I also invite each of you to stay after the conversation for an informal reception where you'll have the opportunity to meet them and ask your questions. We'll first start with Mr. Parsa Pekar, who is an alumni of our clinical psychology program, a psychotherapist, and an adjunct professor here at GSEP. Welcome, Parsa. Parsa, can you please share what part of Iran that you're from, and if you're comfortable when you immigrated to the US and your current ties to Iran?
I'm from Tehran, the capital, and I came 2007.
Thank you. Next, we have Ms. Mariam Sefati, a visual development artist in the animation industry. Mariam, can you please share what part of Iran that you're from and if you're comfortable when you immigrated and your current ties?
2011, and I came from Tehran, the capital.
Thank you, Mariam. Dr. Simin Taylor, U.S. Veteran Service Representative, Special Emphasis Program Management, and a GSEP alumna of our EDOL doctoral program. Dr. Taylor, can you please share what part of Iran you're from and any current ties, if you're comfortable?
I grew up in northern part of Iran, Amol. Amol is well known for its heroes such as Ghazali Chalabi, Irfan Rizai, Mahdiz Hosseini, and Akbar Muhammadi. These lists of the names go on for days to fill out for brave Iranian women and men. Two of my brothers, Manucher and Akbar Muhammadi, were political and human rights activists. The security forces arrested Manucher and Akbar for leading the largest demonstrations in 1999. Akbar sentenced to death. With the international pressure, my brother's execution pardoned by Supreme Leader to 15 years in prison. Also, with the international support, Manucher sentenced to 15 years in prison. After over 7 years being in prison and continued torture and pressure, the Iranian regime killed my best friend, my hero, my brother, my sweet Akbar. Akbar was well known for symbol of resistance and courage. Majority of my family members spent times in prison. My father and I were arrested by security forces only because our connection to my brothers. All I did to get arrested was to do my duties, to enhance my brothers' voices, to news media outlets so the world can hear them. With the international pressure, I released from jail with bond, and I escaped from Iran to Turkey. And I was accepted to come to United States under political assignment in 2006.
Thank you, Dr.
Sure.
Taylor. We recognize how tender this
Thank
topic
you.
is. Just lift up the bravery of your family. Thank you. Last but not least, we have Ms. Toranj Kevan.
Yes, my name is Toranj, and I was born in Tehran, and I left when I was about 6 years old in 95. My mom was a teacher in Iran, and she saw how overnight the curriculum changed, and they didn't want me to go to school in that environment. So before I had to start grade 1, start wearing a hijab and be told lies, I was taken out.
Thank you for being here. We've heard from news sources about the current calls for freedom in Iran. We've heard the name Mahsa Amini and seen photos of protests around the world, yet we all come with varying understanding of the history of Iran that has led to today's outcries. I've asked Dr. Taylor to take on the impossible task of boiling down the last 40 years of contemporary Iranian history in an effort just to provide us with some shared context.
Sure.
Dr. Taylor.
Sure. The Islamic Republic of Iran gained power in 1979 after Ayatollah Khomeini overthrew the ruling Shah. Since then, the Islamic Republic of Iran's law and regulation is based on Jafari Shia Islam. After Islamic Republic of Iran, the government rolled back the human rights and routinely discriminated against women, children, the members of the LGBTQ communities, the religious and ethnic minorities. The Islamic Republic of Iran criticized by restriction and punishment that follow by constitution and law for torture, rape, and killing the political prisoners and beating and killing the dissident and other civilians. The Islamic Republic of Iran is the main sponsor of the terror around the world. They provide the financial support. They provide the training and equipment to all the terrorists around the world, especially, what's the name? Hezbollah, thank you. Iranian people mostly pro-Western. They are looking for freedom and democracy, but Iranian regime suppressed any kind of peaceful protest with violence anytime they arise and demand for human rights, such as 1999, the student movement, 2009, Green Movement, 2019 protest, and current revolution. The main reason for this revolution is for the 22 years Kurdish woman, Mahsa Amini. Mahsa was arrested by morality police because she wore improperly hijab. She was beaten when they transferred her to detention center. She went in coma and died 3 days later. Since then, we see enormous amount of protests almost every day in every single city of Iran.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. It's helpful when we see what's happening in the news to know that there is a history behind it and that repression over time leads to these acts of protest. So thank you for sharing that
Sure.
context with all of us. I'd now like to open up the panel conversation to obtain insight into the current day. Mariam, as an Iranian woman living in the US, can you encapsulate your feelings when you see what's happening in your home country?
When it happened, it was very heartbreaking and it was very painful and it was hard to process and understand what is happening. But I think to just see that everybody coming out, and it was hard, it was so painful to see that we are coming out and standing out for our rights because of the very strong shared pain, that it becomes so big that there was no need for anybody to call out. It was just people on their own coming into the street. And as painful as it was hopeful, because when I left, I believed that as an artist, as a woman in Iran, there is no hope. I did whatever I could, and there is no way I can achieve anything, because it's not about who I am. It's not about what I can do. It's all about what is my gender. And I was not wanted. I was born in a wrong gender. So I had to leave. But now when I see all these young people coming out and fighting, I feel like there is hope. And what they did, it's so amazing that I grew up in a generation right after the revolution. I was the generation of like the children of the revolution. And I was brainwashed like so many other kids who grew up at my age and in the bubble that they designed for us. And insulting the supreme leader was also something that we couldn't even let ourselves to think about. But these kids coming out, tear the pictures apart and calling out for the right. And I'm inspired. I don't know what it can be stronger than that, what it can be bigger than that. And having this revolution that is a women's revolution, I don't think we have ever in the history that people coming out and the main priority that they're asking for is women's right. And because in all the revolution, people were asking maybe for human's right, but this is women's rights first, and especially in Middle East. And it gives me so much hope, so much inspiration, and I want to be able to help, even though we are so far away. And the other amazing thing that here I have the privilege of having friends from Afghanistan, Syria, and other countries from Middle East, and they are telling me that they also gaining hope. After seeing what is happening, they're also starting coming together and wanting to also make a change. So I'm truly hopeful that this change is going to happen, because I believe with the free Iran, we're definitely going to have a better world, safer country.
Thank you, Mariam.
Sure.
What I hear from you too is that the risk is so high. And so for you to see how much people are risking their lives for freedom is inspiring. And then I also hear you say that it also it serves as a role model to others as well too, and inspires those all over the world, not just in Iran.
And can I add one more thing?
Please.
I'm also amazed by the creativity of Iranian artists, especially the one from Iran who have been risking their life to make a piece of art and share it out there. One of my friends was just recently telling like how many animators or filmmakers are in Iran, like how many can come up, because in these 2 months I already seen so many short movies and short animation, which already takes so much effort to make. But these kids are just with so much passion and energy, they are going full forces and they're making it, and it's amazing.
Yeah, thank you. I also had the pleasure of reading one of Mariam's articles as well too, and was just really inspired by your candid reflections and the vulnerability you shared about your experiences. So if you all have an opportunity to look up, that would be great. So Mariam, your slides are being shown up there too, if you'd
Okay.
like to speak to them.
I just wanted to quickly also have some visual aids about the clothing, and because people are targeting, they're burning their scarves, and the scarves and hijab is the symbol of the freedom. The getting free from it is the symbol of the freedom. So I just wanted to just quickly add some visuals about it to what does it mean? Like what is Iranian clothing was, what does it mean? So first thing first, Iran as a country is not just half Persian, it's all ethnicities and different people living together, and we love one and each other. Unfortunately, this government tries so hard to separate us, but now you see everybody backing each other out, standing together, and it's also another amazing, wonderful thing. So you can see here that the chart of the ethnicities, and if we go to the next slide. Oh, here's over there. I can't see that. Oh, okay. So here's a sample of clothing. So this is how Iranians used to be. This is traditional Iranian clothing all over the country. So the reason I wanted to show you this, because when we talk, the government of Iran forcing this dress code to Iranian women in the name of Islam, that women have to be covered. But when you look at the Iranian clothing, it was very already covered in layers. And what is important about traditional clothing, that every clothing it's not just meant to cover, it's also your reflection of your environment and your relationship with your environment, the climate, the people, your beliefs, your religion. And it's very important, it's very also symbolic, and it means something to society. So having your traditional clothing is very important, and celebrating that is also very important and gives you identity. It also passed through history and identity to the people. But this government changed it. Also, if we go to the next slide, please. Oh, so this is the time. And so I wanted to also reflect that during the time so this is in order, like from the very ancient time to the modern time, how the clothing was. So you still can see that this was very modest, this was very layered and covered, and also it has so much color. They used to say Iran was the land of colors and flowers. But then when you see what is happening now, to the second slide. So some of the pictures that you see, the line on the top is the Iranians right before revolution. You could see that people hand in hand with different beliefs having place in the societies. And then in the middle, you are saying that there are also like the two papers are the first papers that they gave up as a law of hijab, and how from now on how women should wear. And there are these dress codes like these veils, like black veils, that they are mandating it. In the Qajar time, when you look at it, yes, women had them, but women had no roles in the society. They meant to stay home. But then in Pahlavi area, that they try to break that, and women coming out, and they also trying to have more activities. They have more identity, more personality, and breaking free. And they were going to have also more freedom in their choosing of their clothing. But then now with this government, they took us back in so many years ago. And then this clothing and then what they did is also to separate the society from like demonizing people who are not agree with them. I put some of the pictures that if you choose to not to wear this thing, you're going to go to hell and you are not good. And then that, as I was growing up, I remember that also affected my relationship with my classmates, because deep in our heart, we were afraid if we had different type of clothing, how much we can trust each other. And so as people also growing up together, we couldn't have any close relationship. And you have to like find your people. You cannot have you out of your circles and experience more. It was just that fear, that policing that go through every pieces of your life. Yeah.
Thank you. That's really helpful, I think, to have that visual of what repression looks like. And I also just appreciate your perspective that the repression also triggers the stifling of the self and the stifling of personality. And so the individuality also gets lost or unidentifiable. And so to be able to visually see that is such a powerful image. So thank you for putting those together. Thank you. Toranj, I have the same question for you. Can you please encapsulate your feelings for us when you see what's happening in Iran?
Initially, I remember being in the kitchen with my best friend and us when we had heard the news of Mahsa, just crying in the kitchen. And as soon as we started to hear about the way people were responding, it gave us more hope than ever before. I remember telling people, as it was happening, telling my American friends, and one friend said, "Oh, but something's always happening in the Middle East, right?" And that broke my heart, because we are not just Iran, but it's individual stories, brilliant people, a huge amount of the women. I believe I heard it on the news that 97% of women in Iran are educated. We have these incredibly talented people who want to expand and be creative, and their life force is completely limited by the regime. And there's only so far you can go. There's only so much you can do. There's only so much that you can desire. And what I'm inspired to do as someone in cinema is to tell the stories of Iranian women, because we're not just a statistic. It's not just the Middle East, something's happening in the Middle East. Iran is being held hostage. And within it are beautiful, beautiful human beings whose stories are just as valid as yours and mine. And there are many girls who wish they had the opportunities that I did to do photography, to do acting, to explore themselves. It's not just about a hijab or a scarf. That's the most superficial layer of it. There's so much underneath. And it's so horrifying that when we discuss, and there's so much that the West doesn't know, the media doesn't cover, when we discuss or when we share the posts among ourselves as Iranians, and we'll look at each other and we'll go, how do we tell people in the West that this is happening? It's not believable. It's not believable. In the name of God, there are girls in jail who are calling their parents asking for birth control. They're asking for birth control. When a girl is sentenced to death for going against God, she's first raped so she doesn't go to heaven. How do we tell people that? I mean, the stories are so horrific, but we need to tell people. And what's happening right now in Iran is the most hope we've ever had. People know that they have to keep moving forward, that they have to make their voices heard. There is no other choice because there is no life and expansion within these walls of the regime. There's nothing. You have to, and people are more powerful than ever before. And I know throughout history, in the future, we will look back at the bravery of women today because it is beyond anything I've ever seen.
Thank you, Toranj. I think sometimes when we see something on television or in media, there's this level of removal. And so to really take that time to realize that these are individual people with individual stories,
Yes,
is so important, especially when they're not able to share their own. Thank you. Farsa, you offer a different perspective as our male panelist here. So can you please share what it's like for you as an Iranian male living in the US and seeing what's happening in Iran?
Yes, so it's heartbreaking. I think Iranians can relate that all these things that happen to us, doesn't matter if we are, male or female, we all been affected. Certainly for me, every day is like a challenge. We check the news all the time. And for us who have family in Iran, I mean, we are so worried about them. Sometimes we cannot talk to them. They cut down the internet, so there's no way. And it's just heartbreaking. I was there last year, actually. Last summer, I was in Iran. And saw young people, I was very upset because I could see they have no hope. There's no sense of future for their lives. When you talk to them, they don't see a point. But now it seems all those disappointments have come in the form of protest or wanting something more. And it's more heartbreaking because when you see the people who get killed are mostly young people in their 18, 20s, or sometimes kids. And it seriously breaks my heart. I check the news every day, but sometimes it gets overwhelming. I know for so many people, that's what's been happening. I've been in contact with people in Iran who needed therapy help. And for them, it's even worse. So it's just very heartbreaking. But as everyone mentioned, I think this time we feel there is a difference. There's a difference. We have hope. I believe we're going to see a change. And we all feel that within ourselves because we cannot go back. I feel there is no way to go back. And people are becoming more courageous nowadays. We have women who are actors in Iran who are standing up. They, take off their hijab and, they're supporting the movement. We have men who are really supportive. So it's very collective. And I think it's the maybe first time we are even putting aside the gender issues between men and women, and we are coming together as one people that, we are here for each other. We're going to support you. no matter what. So I'm hopeful, even though every day I see the news and really, it's really painful for me to watch those things. But at the end, I believe there will be a positive change. I'm pretty sure of that we'll see a positive change. It will be led by young people. Of course, women have a big part of in it. And we're going to have a country where I think, as everyone been mentioning, we can be ourselves. We can be whatever we believe in and live next to each other in peace.
Thank you, Parsa. Just the fact that you were there last year, that you were able to touch and to see firsthand what that experience was like for you, and now to see it through the media must be very jarring.
Yes, especially with the economy situation. They've been on sanction for a while. So see kids in the street who are beggars. I mean, it's so heartbreaking. And I think the good thing is we have a big population of young people who now have, really know what's going on in the world. So they don't really take what's happening in Iran. So they're kind of asking for their rights. And those are the people who are leading this. So that's one of the reasons I'm very hopeful, because they're all young generation who are really standing up for themselves and for what they believe in, which is freedom.
Which is inspiring. Yeah, thank you. Dr. Taylor, with the increased access and use of social media, the flow of public information out of Iran is greater than it has been in decades, although I know more recently it's been stifled significantly. I know you've researched and written your doctoral dissertation examining the role social media platforms provide for oppressed women in Iran in sharing their stories and fight for equality and human rights. Will you please share a bit about the use of social media in today's protests, as well as the limitations, blockage, manipulation of information as well?
The main reason the world were silenced over 40 years against the violation of the human rights was political and economic issue. The world wanted to have a trade with Iran. They wanted to buy the cheap oil and gas from Iran. They wanted to sell weapons and combat equipment to Iran neighbors country. They wanted to encourage Iran to sign and state a joint plan of action. The United States gave around 1.7 billion of Iranian frozen money to the Iranian regime. The Iranian regime used that money to suppress the political and human rights activists inside and outside of Iran. Iranian regime used that money to support the terrorists and proxy war around the world. Unfortunately, the world support the Iranian regime lobbyists like NIAC organization, and they highlighted their voice, but political and human rights activists' voice did not hear enough. Still, Iranian regime discriminated against women, men, minorities, such as ethnic and religious minorities. The death of Mahsa Amini was a spark for Iranian people. Now, women inside of Iran leading this demonstration, this revolution. We see that now majority of people inside of Iran have some sort of access to social media. They were able to send videos and pictures of the this recent revolution in real time. Now we see that people around the world are coming together to support the Iranian women inside of Iran. They are coming to a street chanting and asking from their politician to support Iranian movement. We see that non-Iranian singer singing to support the Iranians women inside of Iran. They are holding Mahsa Amini's pictures. We see that non-Iranian TVs discussing and talking and supporting Iranian movement. People painting, drawing, sharing a story. The truth is what really happening inside of Iran. Now, government, parliament around the world supporting this revolution. Iranian regime is scared. They are killing directly the children between 5 to 18 years. The world cannot be quiet and silent. These human and children rights violation that be committed by this terrorist regime. Access to internet, nearly impossible inside of Iran now. People have a very little access to internet or no access to internet. That's why we are pleading for internet mogul that by Elon Musk provide more Starlink satellite to Iran, such like he provided for Ukraine. We need internet now. As I talk, the people in Iran is going to murder because they are fighting for their freedom. People who has access to internet, they don't have no choice to connect to VPN in order to connect to Twitter and Instagram. That's the main source for them to connect to each other and move forward with this revolution.
Thank you, Dr. Taylor. That social media has really brought visibility around the world in a way that people can't ignore. And so when that is shut down, I just imagine that the people inside Iran feel or fear invisibility. And social media is such a tool for mobilization.
Of course.
Yeah, thank you. Now I'd like to turn our attention to coping and community service. Parsa, you alluded to this a little bit earlier. I know that speaking of social media, that you've utilized WhatsApp to offer psychological services to those in Iran. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Sure. So the way it started for me was, I'm sure when we hear the news and everything, all of us think, okay, what can I do for people? So my idea was, because of my field, I can share a post on social media on my Instagram that I can provide, free therapy to people who are in Iran by WhatsApp or Telegram. So I started getting requests and, talk to them 30 minutes, 45 minutes each, to my best ability I could. And what I realized was art was certainly a form where they could express themselves. So at the end of usually each session, I would encourage them to either write or do a drawing or something. And then I said, let me know how that goes. So I realized many of them, as Mariam was saying earlier, we have such a creative people and talented. So many of them really use that art as a way of therapy. And I actually thought, well, this would be great if we can, find a way to present the work of artists from Iran in something like this, which I'm very grateful for Pepperdine and Dr. Majidi for providing us this space. So we can showcase their work and show a support in that way to people. And I think art can come a long way when you want to send a message, because it's a common language between all people. We all can understand. The song we just heard, I'm sure many people who don't really understand even the words, if we don't put the translation, they can still somehow relate because it's a feeling. So art can have such a great power. And so that's what I did. And I'm going to continue doing that as long as people need that. So what I always encourage people who I talk in here or outside of Iran is we can definitely use whatever we have, doesn't matter what it is, right? Like our talents, our skills, whatever, to show our support that way if we want to do something. I know Toranj mentioned too, she wants to do it through cinema or film or movie. I think every one of us, to our own ability, we have that power and ability to provide our support. If it's through art, through therapy, whatever that is, I think that's very much possible and it's needed. It's certainly needed for people who are in Iran. So.
Thank you, Parsa. I think sometimes, when you realize the magnitude of the situation, it can be so overwhelming and not knowing where do I start, how I can help. And so I just appreciate you reflecting that we start with our sphere of influence and utilize our talents to provide support based on those talents so that we can make an impact in our own way. So thank you for that.
Sure.
Yeah. So speaking of talents, Toranj, you had shared with me about joy culture, and I would just love for you to be able to share with the audience a little bit more about how you utilize your own talents and skills to process and to heal for yourself and then support others in being able to do the same.
Yeah, sure. So I'm an actor and spent many years as a photographer, but more than both of those, what I've been interested in is personal development. And before the word personal development, I was a seeker. I wanted to know everything about every religion. I wanted to know truth. I was a truth seeker. And so I started a company with a friend of mine called Joy Culture, where we take small things like, not small, but mundane things like jealousy, and we discuss them and we talk about how jealousy is simply a symptom of you experiencing a gap between where you are and where you want to be, and how to then empower yourself by understanding what it is that you truly want and going for it. And what fascinated me, being on that journey of personal development and understanding, what fascinated me and what I was most interested in is how is it possible that this is happening? From this perspective, we all call them terrorists, but they themselves don't know they're terrorists. And I was interested in understanding. I said, okay, if these horrific things are happening, can all of these people be psychopaths? Like, can we biologically look at everyone and say, okay, everyone's a psychopath? No, but belief has to alter the brain. And Time Magazine had done I started researching, and Time Magazine had done an article on a research that was done that showed that extremists, meaning people who are willing to kill for their values, when their brains are scanned and they're proposed questions, and they said, would you be willing to kill for this statement, for this belief of yours, for this value of yours? They found that the part of the brain that deliberates with those extremists turn off. So there's no deliberation when you're looking at extremism. And the moment it turns back on again is when you start telling them that people in their religion, this is particularly this research done was with Muslim extremists, people in their religion do not have the same belief. And that's when the part of the brain that deliberates started to turn on again. And how I've been personally processing this is understanding what is it that we need to do individually and socially and culturally within our belief systems to go back to believing in things that are not harmful to the self or to the society. And one of the things that I'm very interested in is seeing people from different walks of life, and especially of different religions, especially from Islam, coming together in love and unity of what that religion represents. Because even in the words, I don't belong to any religion, but even in the words, Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim means in the name of God, the compassionate and merciful. And so what I'm understanding is that there's a gap between that which we are worshiping and our own personal responsibility. Because in my personal understanding, when I love something, my love of it means, for me, love is unity. And when I love something and I love a God or I love a concept, I want to get as close to it as possible. I want to be that merciful person. I want to be merciful. I want to be compassionate. I want to be loving. And what I would like to see is people coming together from all walks of life, especially in Islam, to be more compassionate and more loving and to really represent what it's supposed to represent and to become that, to embody that.
Thank you. What I hear you say, and I had the pleasure of talking to Toranj this weekend. What I hear you say is that the more that we can connect to that inner sense of self, the more that we are connected to the larger humanity. And if we can help people reestablish that true connection, that there will be more overall compassion in this world.
Yes, because I'll just add this as well. One of the other belief systems that is causing this issue is that for me to feel connected to my beliefs and my values, you need to also believe it. And that is it. When I see videos, some of the videos that are going viral is, you know, a girl who doesn't have her hijab on as one of the protesters, and men following her going, wear your hijab, you're dirty, you're this, you're that. And for me, when I witness that, I said, what is the energy of that? And I see somebody who doesn't understand that their connection is direct, who needs me to also believe that for them to feel solid and in their foundation and their beliefs. So, yeah,
that the root is that deep disconnection.
To know that the connection is direct and you don't need other people to believe what you believe for you to be grounded.
Yeah, thank you. That's a very powerful concept.
Yeah,
thank you. Mariam, similar question. How have you utilized art to be able to process and to respond? And if you could also share a little bit more about the relationship you see between art and freedom. You talked a little bit about that with regards to the hijab, but we'd just love to hear more.
Well, the freedom, it's very important because I think art is all about expressing, and artists take whatever is happening around them and their environment and reflecting for people to be able to see themselves through their eyes. And then artists do different things in the society. They make a vision for the future. The more you give them freedom, the better they have abilities and the space to make that vision. So it gave inspiration to the people to go forward. And it's very important because artists can think out of the box. They can find different ways to go forward in different ways. Like, for example, you see movies of the future that people can touch the screens. And then in a few years, you see technology going to follow that, because that's the image people are having of the future and they want to give that to people. And then sometimes with art, you see also people cope. Like when you live in a very limited environment, like what's been happening in Iran, people try to cope. I mean, some artists also try to use that, you know, to just make a business as like being in the favor of the government and get along. And then some people just start coping, and then with that they would do make a fantasy so they can escape from the reality, and they give a space to people to escape from the reality. And then some people use it as to fight back. Like Nima Nayastani is the Iranian cartoonist who also been arrested so many times in Iran, and then now he's out of the country and they're still fighting back, is one of the best examples that they fight back. And that's why authors and artists are usually the first one in the row to get arrested, because they can give a vision, they can give excitement, and they can speak so fast, especially with visual art, that you can see right now it's happening, that people make images that is so hard to explain, but you see that image and you can immediately repost, and it goes fast, and you send the message so quickly because you're passing a feeling. With art, you're passing a feeling, and sometimes feelings can go deeper and faster than a word. And that's very helpful, especially in this situation that that you see a lot of editorial art and editorial illustrations that coming out in the support of the feeling. If somebody get hurt, people start making a portrait as a sympathy. And then if they're angry, they're making anger art, like this is how we're gonna fight. But I haven't seen yet, because of the situation and because of the emptiness, like the space of a leadership. We don't have an opposition yet. We don't have a leadership. We're just fighting back. So we don't have that vision part yet. But with all the artists I know around me, what they do, they really feel so hard and so deep. And the first thing they do, they send it out through their art in all the way they can. And it's been also difficult for them because sometimes they cry and they want, and then I think artists, their immediate reaction is to create. And then sometimes when the feeling is so much and they can't create, so they just pile up and it's very heavy. But that's also making it very passionate is coming out. So that's why when you see these images, that all the artworks that is being shared around, it touches you somehow like very deeper. And it feel also, it also very nice because I think especially for me that I was away from the country and I always missed it. And that was my dream, to be an Iranian artist, to do something for my community. And I was so away from that Iranian art and Iranian community. And now with this, like the same fight that we're all in it, I feel like now I have a community. I don't feel alone anymore. And I feel like I can reach out to my people more directly, and I have more connection to them. And it was also very interesting experience because with this, we start seeing art that we really liked from like different artists. So we start connecting to each other. So like now let's get to find some Iranian artists who live in Europe or Turkey or different countries. And it's been very interesting experience too.
Thank you. That I just appreciated the way that you frame that art is such a powerful expression of deeper values and emotionality. And then you've also used it to be able to connect and establish community, which art also does as well. Yeah, thank you.
So, thank you.
All of you have shared such inspiring actions. Thank you. Let's talk a little bit more about the greater call to action. Dr. Taylor, you shared how much the information inside Iran is stifled, and we've talked about that throughout our discussion tonight. Can you share with our audience trusted sources for information so that we can educate ourselves and stay updated?
Okay. Amnesty International website is a great source to read and review the information, what's really happening inside of Iran. But if you want to get updated daily, what's really happening now inside of Iran, some sources such as VOA, Iran International TV, Manu 2, and Tasbir 1500 in Instagram is great source to see what's going on now inside of Iran. We are not asking money or weapon. We are only asking you to share the information about this revolution. Share in a story in Instagram. every week, people around the world is providing protests. They are participating in protests. At least you can share the time and the place of these protests. People of Iran need your voice as well, because you are raising awareness. You are supporting with sharing, simply with sharing the story. Just tweet, share the story on Instagram. Follow up, because they need their voice to be heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, what I hear you say that when we talk about supporting Iran, it's not on the government level in terms of money and weapons, which is so much of what has discussed in the news, but it's on the people level, and what the people need is a voice, a platform to share their story and to feel a sense of support and mobilization outside of where they are.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you for that.
Sure.
I just want to thank, we're getting close to time, and some of you may want to be able to talk with the panel to meet them during a more informal reception, ask questions. And so we want to give you the opportunity to be able to do that. We also have several works of art by Iranian artists from in and outside of Iran that we've collected for this evening. So they will be rotating on the plasma screens during the event, and also will be shown on Zoom after the panel concludes. So we invite you to take a look at them if you haven't had the opportunity to yet. I just wanted to thank you once again, our panel, for your stories, your wisdom, your vulnerability, and your courage. Thank you. I also want to thank again our interim dean, Dr. Majidi, who embodies benevolent leadership. Thank you. And a special thanks to all of you for attending here in person and on Zoom, for taking the time to listen and to show your support just by being here.
به نام زندگی رها شوی ز طوق بندگی.